We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us today, talking about the 50th anniversary of the launch and the moon landing, which came a few days later. Just a significant moment in American and world history, frankly. With us this morning is Robert Odell. He's a professor over at Vanderbilt. It's good to have you on, sir. I really appreciate it. He was there the day of the launch, worked with Wernher von Braun, who was behind a lot of the technology that led to the ability to launch a rocket in this way. And we were just talking during the break about a lot of us, when we head down south to the Gulf, we make our way through Alabama and we're going through Huntsville. On the right side of the interstate there, as you make your way down, is that rocket. And you were telling me about that. Now, that is a small rocket compared to what the Saturn V was, but what is that?
It's a Saturn IIB, I believe.
Or rather, the Apollo 11.
Whereas the moon rocket was the 5.
Yeah, Saturn V.
So the Saturn rockets were actually a series that started small, and then ultimately the Saturn V was built. But it was a new concept because the concept was multiple engines. Mm-hmm. In the early days, each with its own tank for fuel, its own fuel system. So to get this ensemble of huge engines working together all at the same time.
With the perfect balance, yeah.
And so that's what you see when you stop at the Alabama entrance station, is one of the intermediate rockets, because there just weren't that many Saturn V's left over.
Right, right. I want to remind folks, too, as you talk about all the fuel, and this is rocket fuel, right? It's very, very powerful stuff. These astronauts at the top there are sitting on, basically, if things go wrong, a bomb that would be probably the largest in the world aside from a nuclear weapon. And I want to visit the idea of the dangers involved. And we all know years later what happened with the Challenger explosion and the devastation of that, and something as small as an O-ring that could lead to this. I mean, when I look at that rocket and think of the potential for disaster and all of the moving parts and everything new, I mean, it just boggles my mind that it went off almost without a hitch.
Almost without a hitch. Wow. And in fact, that was probably the most trouble-free flight at that point. Mm-hmm. So, of course, everyone was concentrating on it, but certainly rockets were still routinely blowing up. Mm-hmm.
Right, there's a lot of
mistakes beforehand. Not the Saturns, but the smaller rockets. So it was still learning how to do it at that time, and then to put a man, three in this case, on top of it, and all the things that had to go right.
Right. Well, and the whole idea, I wonder, is talking with Wernher von Braun, the concept. I've always wondered this, and you probably are thinking, Nick, why do you think this way? But I remember, when the rocket launches, and then a portion of it has exhausted its fuel, it just breaks away. This is once you're out of the atmosphere. The idea of that was kind of like, how did you come up with that thinking? All right, as we go, we're burning through the bottom, well, that breaks away. The next one burns through, when that's finally done, then that breaks away, and then we just have the thrusters.
Let me first correct.
Okay.
I had no role in that with von Braun of that program.
Okay, but I just, maybe in the big picture,
thank you for the credit. I should just
well, I'm glad you
quietly take it, but I've got to go home.
Okay, fair enough.
There were several approaches that were considered by the von Braun team, one of which was straight to orbit. That is the whole thing, or to the moon. So the whole thing
stays together.
Would go there. That was their advantages in simplicity and something like that. But when you look at the heft that was required, it couldn't be done.
Okay.
So by peeling off the parts as they had been used and turning on another rocket, and then finally the third single rocket engine, and that was the only way to go.
It makes sense. And when you think about it, a simplistic idea when you realize, well, there's too much there, we have to come up with a better way. Well, how about breaking it? Now, I understand to achieve that is incredibly complex, but what a brilliant idea.
You're talking about highly skilled,
sure.
Creative people. Now, in the film that we just saw of the liftoff, it's hard for people to appreciate what it was like to see a Saturn V leaving, because it moved so slowly. With the shuttle, which people are more familiar with, the engines fire and up it goes.
Up pretty quick, yeah.
Whereas the Saturn V took like 20 seconds to clear the launch tower. And by the time it had cleared the launch tower, it had used up like 20% of all its fuel. And of course, you might say, well, why didn't you make the pedestal, the height of the launch tower, and start it from there and save all that fuel? No, it was already moving fast once it reached it. But they seemed just like they were suspended in air.
And that's because it's so heavy, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's incredibly heavy, and you're still bound by Earth's gravity at this point, of course.
Whereas the shuttle engines produce much more thrust for the weight of vehicle that it was required to lift, and that was really the reason it was so slow.
Let's take a call from Anne. Anne, good morning. Hi, Anne.
Good morning. For 30 plus years, I've enjoyed taking my children and my grandchildren, nieces and nephews beyond the spaceship or the attraction at the Alabama stop. And we've gone beyond what you can see and learn in Huntsville. But I still don't understand exactly what is being done for space in Huntsville, because it's top secret. I've even taken a wrong turn and had them come take me off the property with the armed security when my sister and I made a wrong turn once. What can you tell me is being done in Huntsville? Because for 30 years they have intrigued my family. We go beyond the rest stop, and we have yet to be amazed by what we are being taught. There is always something new. There's always a different exhibit. There's always someone full of information, but we always leave intrigued and going, we still don't know what is being done for space behind those locked doors. So please tell me what you can give me with your wealth of knowledge.
Thank you, Anne.
Rest easy, Anne. Part of what your experience was because the NASA Field Center in Huntsville, Alabama, the Marshall Space Flight Center, is on a military reservation. And therefore, you must have control over who comes and goes. So the security that you encountered would have been because of that, because they're doing research there on the Army side for things in the national defense and the national interest.
Right. Sure.
Whereas the things that are going on in NASA are all public. It is the civilian space agency. It does not do classified work. But they, of course, don't want people interfering with an engineer walking from one building to the next. So some level of security is needed. But right now they are at the Marshall Center there in Huntsville. They're involved with the development of this big new rocket, the replacement for the Saturn V, the modern modern equivalent of it, except it's like we'll be comparing a Model T with a Corvette.
And this new one's target will be Mars?
First, right now it appears the target will be the moon.
Okay.
But it has the ability to lift parts into space that are big enough that when assembled together can go to Mars.
Oh, so the idea would be that you get up there, you assemble it together, and you go from a point in outer space from there to Mars.
Right.
As opposed to a launch from Earth that goes right to Mars.
Correct.
Interesting. So I know that's something that's going on with NASA, but what is your thought about SpaceX and some of these other private, space travel endeavors that we hear going on right now, and whether it goes to the moon or whether they're trying to make their way to Mars privately? What's your thoughts on the success possibility, and will it work?
I think it's great because it's really repeating what happened with aviation here in the United States. To be sure, the Wright brothers started out on their own, but as soon as the airplane was developed enough that you could see a military potential, then the government started building bigger and better airplanes. But the real change in airplanes came through people with a commercial interest of wanting to make transport airplanes and flying people swiftly and safely from one place to the other. So it's very much like the 1910s and early 20s with this proliferation of Boeing, McDonald, companies like that started with a very dynamic individual who was a visionary. So it's just, a century later, we're going through the same thing, but with spaceships.
Amazing. All right, so when you talk about space travel destinations, now we know that the Saturn, or the Apollo 11 mission took 8 days there and back. How long would it take to get from here, or as you say, out and then launch to Mars and back?
Several months.
Several months. So that's a long trip.
And just all kinds of problems with it, besides just building something that will leave the Earth fast enough to reach Mars. That there are things that call cosmic rays, things that come from outer space and are generated by the sun. They're very energetic. When they pass through your body, it causes alterations at the level of cells. And so when we fly in airplanes near the top of the Earth's atmosphere, if you spent your life flying in an airplane, hopefully first class, that you would probably be damaged by it. The short time that you and I fly, it's not a problem. But in space, they don't have the Earth's atmosphere to protect the person. So that going to the moon, there is a certain level risk. Or staying in the shuttle for a year, there's a certain level, non-zero level risk. And going to Mars, where you're there for months, and you're, unlike the space station, you're in something that's made as small as possible in order to get there, where you don't have all this metal around you protecting you.
All right, that's fascinating. Let's take a break. When we come back, among other things, we can take a few more phone calls, but it's our final segment. To get an idea, you talk about something fast enough. Are the rockets they're making now going to be able to travel faster than the rockets did with the Saturn V? And what is the top end speed of a rocket these days? We'll be back with that answer and more right after this.